Welcome to TMG Today. Join other master manifestors across the globe to turn your goals into reality at lightning speed. Here, we connect the dots for you so you can skip all the nonsense and finally get unstuck. Right here on the Manifestor's Guide Today. Let's go.
Hey everybody, welcome to TMG Today, the Manifestor's Guide podcast. I am Dewey Charley.
And I am Charlie Carroll. Welcome everyone.
Welcome. Our mission is to create master manifestors across the globe. So here we explore the intersection of universal law, success principles, and brain science. All amazing fun stuff, but we do it in a fun way. So thanks for joining us today. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share at whatever platform that you are experiencing us on. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us wherever podcasts are available. And this is going to be an exciting adventure today, Charlie.
Absolutely.
Don't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love taking these, we call them like higher level ideas that sound complex and too technical to practice in your life, but I love bringing them into the a really relatable space. And that's what we're doing today.
Well, and today's topic is, as we said last week, this is one of the most important topics that I've ever been introduced to, throughout my coaching experience and through having my mentors. This has been one of the most amazing concepts. This is a success principle called closing open cycles. It'll absolutely change your life. So we're going to talk about that today. And we do have a community question. So just so everybody knows and the listeners, this podcast is an extension of our Manifestors Inner Circle community. So, we say TMG is on a mission to create master manifestors across the globe. What we mean by that is we do it through many mediums. This podcast, we also have access to unlimited coaching where we help everybody out there. We also have a full system that walks people through reprogramming their subconscious minds for ultimate success. But this community, as the Manifestor's Guide Inner Circle, is one of those resources that is just incredible. You always learn through other people. And so we take these topics that we talk about on this podcast, but we delve much deeper into them and actual science behind it, and especially the brain science behind some of this stuff. So you can start to learn how to work with your brain and actually reprogram it and orient yourself towards success. So that's in the Manifestor's Guide Inner Circle. If you want more information about any of that stuff, and if you want to coach with us, please feel free to go to the website. It's manifestorsguide.com. Plenty of info there. We also have blogs and cool stuff coming out there all the time. So you can also put your email in and sign up for updates. All that good stuff. You'll figure it out there. manifestorsguide.com. But part of this community is that we have made it very easy. And then part of the community, though, is that you can actually ask questions that we will answer here on the podcast. So we have one of those community questions today as it relates to closing open cycles. So let's let her rip, Charlie.
Taking Tanya J's question. Tanya is from Oklahoma City and in Oklahoma. And she is asking us, I am a bit overwhelmed in life at the moment. I've finally done my assessments and identified my top 6, but I just can't seem to find the time needed for my goals. How do I make time for all these new things in my life? And just for everyone who is outside of the system watching this, what Tanya's referring to, the top 6 and our assessments, we have a number of assessments throughout our system that help you really identify your goals and where you're at, et cetera, et cetera. The top 6 specifically is part of our lifetime goals assessment. This is something you do right away when you join the system. It helps you identify the top most important things in your life that you are going to then frame the rest of your other goals and adventures around. We always want to be,
and if you're I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I would say last thing I was going to say is we always, when we identify what's most important to us, we want to always be making sure that how we're using our energy from day to day in every single choice that we're making, is it serving it in some way? We want to ask ourselves that. And so that's what Tanya is referring to in the top 6.
And if you're not in our system and doing what Tanya's doing, you still can identify your top 6. Sometimes it's harder for people to do that. But if you're somebody like me, I've pretty much known my lifetime goals for my entire life. I just didn't know how to achieve any of them. But I mean, they're pretty much the same things throughout my life. I've changed, I would say I've changed maybe like 1.5. You know, I've reworded one of them and then like maybe made a new one, but the rest of them have been pretty much the same for my life. So if you're one of those people, this might be a really good time to just write down some of your goals and then pick a top 6 if you can just do it right off the top of your head. But it is something you're going to revisit, not only in life, but even for the people who are actually doing our system and going through that. Right. This is something that you revisit and keep reevaluating. And as you are manifesting things into your life, you keep replacing these items on your top 6. So it's a good practice to be writing your goals down. There's a study, I don't remember the exact statistics. I think it was like 60 or 70% of people who write down their goals actually achieve those goals over people who don't write them down at all. So just physically writing them down and looking at them, it's a very, very distinct difference. Yes, much higher percentage. So, but this is a great question, and thank you for your question, Tanya. I think a lot of people have this question, especially when they try to incorporate anything new into their lives, whether it's I'm gonna need to go to the gym and exercise, or the excuse that we hear a lot. And it is an excuse, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I know that's kind of a triggering word for some people because they're like, it's not an excuse. This is, I really don't have time. But what we hear a lot is that, you know, my life is so busy, I don't have time to add these new things in. So we're going to talk about this concept of open cycles, what that means, how to close the open cycles in your life, and create the space that you desire for all the growth and all the good things in life, and what that actually means. And then talk about the law of compensation and how this all relates to time and brain power, processing and overwhelm. A lot of times the people who are saying these things are very overwhelmed with trying to add new things into their life because they already feel overwhelmed to start with. So trying to tack on one more thing is just too much for some people. So we're going to put all this into perspective today and do it in a way that's very, very easy.
Yes. And I'm really glad Tanya mentioned the top 6, because this is why the top 6 is so important. And what you all will see as we discuss this is how much you can remove from your life that's currently open, that's currently sucking your energy out, that is not serving your lifetime goals. And now you know it's just, once you see that, you have such a great sense of how you can use your energy and time better.
Well, and also, yes, and then when you're stagnated, or in what I call the gray zone, I just call that in my own life, when there's a gray area or a gray zone where there's not clarity, it's undefined, right? You don't have your goals defined. You don't know where you're going. You're just kind of floating through life. When you're in that gray zone and there is not clarity there, it's very easy to, what I call, taking steps to the side. It's very easy to sidestep over here where it feels like change and it feels good in your life because it's something different, but it's not necessarily a step forward because you don't know what forward is. Think of yourself in the middle of a circle, right? And your goal is going to be right in front of you only if you know where your goal lies and what it is, right? But every time that you turn, take one step to the left or one step to the right, your trajectory changes. So depending on where your goal is, you know, from where you are in the center of that circle, on the outer bigger circle, you're either taking a step to the side, still not toward your goal, or you're going right toward it. And that's why identifying what our goals are so important. So we're going to talk about all this stuff today. This is going to be a fantastic episode, and we will get right to it right after this break.
TMG is partnered with Podbean to bring you new episodes each week. Are you finally ready to step into your own power and let your voice be heard? Well, then why not start your very own podcast? Remember, what you find ordinary, others will find extraordinary. It's never been easier to produce and distribute your podcast to every major podcasting app available. Podbean also makes monetizing your podcast foolproof, so you can add value to the world while you're making money. Thanks to our partnership, you can try your first month absolutely free. Visit podbean.com/TMG today. That's podbean.com/TMG today.
Brain science has shown that by the time you're 7 years old, you've installed a program in your mind that you'll run for a lifetime. And for 99% of us, we're running a program of struggle. But you can change that. At TMG, we've designed a system to install this new programming to get you exactly where you want to go. With the power of brain science and multisensory learning, you'll discover your path of least resistance as you manifest your goals into reality. And for a limited time, you can try the Manifestor's Guide to Ease system absolutely risk-free. This system comes with unlimited access to weekly coaching for accelerated results, as well as instant membership into the Manifestor's Inner Circle online community. If you're ready to finally get unstuck and create the ultimate life success you know you're capable of, visit manifestorsguide.com. Use coupon code TMG today for 10% off, and we'll send the Manifestor's Guide to Ease system to your email right now. That's manifestorsguide.com.
And welcome back. All right, let's talk about closing open cycles, Charlie. So what was your introduction to this before we jump into this? Because I'm so excited to get to this, but I'm not going to get right to it before we tease it a little bit, because I know everybody wants to know what we're talking about here. How has this changed your life? Because it has changed my life in every way possible, is practicing the success principle.
Once I heard this concept, it put it shined a light right on so many of my own frustrations, and gave me a tool to use that allowed me to actually start correcting them. And for me, this concept popped into my life when I had the need. I got really decisive about the goals that I wanted to achieve, and where I was at and what I was going to have to do to bring those goals into my reality. And as I was starting into it, working full time, balancing relationships and balancing just the various things that were already existing in my life, I was finding myself so tired, and I was finding myself just kind of strung out, trying to do so many things at once. And again, we always talk about old programming here, and it's so part of the old programming to think that you're just supposed to manage all this, that stress and anxiety and unfinished things and feeling drained is part of life and being human. It's a choice. It doesn't have to be. And I was starting to come to understand that. And when I heard the concept of open cycles framed, and I'll let you unpack it in a moment, Dewey, but that we have to deliberately put finite endings on things, that we have to, like all the tabs on an internet browser, we have to close out the tabs when we're done with them. We have to deliberately complete things and close where we send our energy so that it can then come back and return to us, or that it keeps our energy within us to manage much more purposefully toward what we want. My mind was blown because I realized basically I had about 500 open circuits that were just sending energy out that I never got anything back from. And I was trying to maintain that every single day. And it took me back to physics in junior high or high school, whenever I took that. And we remember talking about circuitry and everything. I remember going, oh yeah, well, you've got an open circuit here. That energy just kind of goes and doesn't serve anything else. It just kind of goes that direction and just goes. And it never. And
the energy is lost.
It's lost. And the whole system, which would be, when we're talking about the system, the energy system, we're talking about us as people. My energy system was just, it was deploying so much useless energy that wasn't bringing me anything back. And once I clicked that, it was so fun to start closing those circuits.
That's amazing. That was it's amazing. And
it's a life-changing concept, y'all.
Oh, absolutely. And we are going to dive into it in one more second, but this is why it's important to hear other people's experiences before we dive into exactly what this is, because I think we can all relate to that in some way. It's so relatable, especially all the feelings of overwhelm and of just being so drained, and then understanding the concept of we're expending energy, but where is it going, right? And I think that we've all experienced that at some point in our lives where we feel burnt out. I think burnout is a huge thing for many, many people in their lives. They don't have anything left to give. And if they do, it is very little, and it's not for themselves. So we're going to talk about that in context with closing these open cycles. So let me introduce just what this concept is, and then we're going to break it down a little bit and do a little exploration. It's going to be fun. So we always talk about here reprogramming, right? Well, we talk about reprogramming in your mind because your brain is a computer. So you are literally running a software program in your brain at all times. And that's why we talk about what program are you running. Let's identify that. And then let's deprogram that program that ain't working, and let's program you with a new program that is designed to get you exactly where you want to go. So let's think of our brain as a computer, because it is, and it has scientifically been proven to be so. So just like your computer, think about your CPU usage, right? When you don't have anything running on your computer, there's no programs open, nothing's going on, you just rebooted it and it's fresh, man, it's going at lightning speed. But think about once you start opening all these applications, and then you have all your emails open, and then you open all, different web browsers, and you got all the tabs open, and you just have all these things that are running and processing at one time. Well, what does that do to your CPU? It slows everything down, right? There's things just running, processes running that are not actually requiring anything and don't need to be open, but are taking part of that CPU usage. That is the exact same principle of what happens in our lives. And this can relate to time. This can relate to us just processing information. In every area of our lives, when we have open tabs that we need to close, we slow down, we stagnate, we get blocked. And closing our open cycles is a way to concentrate all of our energy. It's like what you said, Charlie, with the open circuit. You don't just leave an open circuit where the energy just pours out, right? And you're just wasting all of your battery power. You make sure that everything is connected to your life in a way where it creates, and we always talk about a cyclical energy flow. You want to make sure that one end of the battery goes back to the other end of the battery. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's where your power comes from. Yeah.
Well, I would say, and for anyone in the audience who may not be like jiving with the physics analogies, think of it like, have you ever been walking on the street and you just see a pipe out of the ground just pouring water out in the street? And you're like, this is such a waste. You just like look at it, and you just kind of see that water is just like, think of it that way too. It's like, it has the opportunity to go somewhere that's useful, but it's not, because it's just been left open. It is just
and an example of
it is. We just flood an example all this
of that,
and
yes, and an example of that in real life would be something like I actually had somebody recently tell me, because we like to identify all these things in people's lives, so it relates directly to them. They were unaware that an open cycle for them was they had a big fight with a family member, right? So they had this fight. They weren't speaking right now, but the cycle was left open. They had no resolution. So this was on their mind, in the back of their mind, as they were going and doing all these other things in their lives and trying to accomplish this. And so this was one of many, many cycles that was left unfinished. So we started identifying in many other areas of life where there were open cycles, where there were unfinished projects, where there were unfinished relationships, right? There were so many tabs left open, because once you have a tab left open in one space, it slows everything else down and creates a lot of other tabs that are left open, because you never end up finishing things. So if you find yourself being one of these people who procrastinates and is overwhelmed, ask yourself, well, why do I procrastinate and why am I overwhelmed? Do I have a lot of open tabs, a lot of unfinished things in my life that are, even if I don't want to be thinking about them, are constantly on the back burner of my mind, or constantly in my subconscious, and I know that there are unfinished things, so it's overwhelming for me to even start something new. Because this can be anything. And I think that is such an eye-opener to people. This can be unpaid bills. It can be in relationships. For me personally, it has been creative projects for me. Most of my open tabs are relationships and creative projects that have never come to completion. And over the last couple of years, closing those unfinished projects up and deciding whether I'm either going to let them go completely or whether I need to polish them up and put them out into the world. But making those decisions one at a time has been life-changing. It's taken all the stress and the burden off and created so much more space in my life for everything that I could have ever possibly wanted to kind of pour in. And so that was what the question that Tanya asked earlier is how do I create space for the goals? Well, one of these things is to close these open cycles. And I want to shift really quick and talking about how that relates directly to the law of compensation. So, Charlie, will you give a little overview of law of compensation for the listeners?
Yeah. So the law of compensation is telling us, it's one of the universal laws, and we talk about all the universal laws in the Manifestor's Guide to Ease system. the law of compensation tells us that we basically get back what we give, if we let go of the negative pull, we're now making room for the positive side of it. So if you let go of anger and frustration in your life, you are releasing that from you. So you're not going to get that anymore. You're going to get its opposite. You're going to get resolve. You're going to get happiness. And so where we like to kind of simplify law of compensation, say we create space for the new by getting rid of the old or by getting rid of the unwanted. And basically you are compensated for what you release or give. By releasing
and what's really
the unwanted or
fascinating,
the negative, you're making space for the positive.
Yes. And what's really fascinating with law of compensation, because I've heard it said many different ways throughout my life, but had no idea that that was an underlying universal principle. But one of the ones that I love is when people say, you got to let go of good things to make room for great things. Yes. That's one that I have heard for my whole life, and I never really understood that directly relates to the compensation part of this. And the way that I like to explain this to people is I always use this example of like furniture. When you want to go buy new furniture, right? And you buy a new sofa, you buy a whole set, just everything, right? Love seat, couches, whatever. Yes. And you want to just completely redecorate and you want to impress all your friends. So you're throwing this party, you go buy all the furniture. Well, what do you do with the old furniture? You got to move it out of your house to set up all the new furniture to make it look clean and good. If you don't, well, what is left? You literally just have a bunch of new furniture stacked on all the old furniture. And think about this over a lifetime. How many times do we move if we keep taking all the old with us, the unfinished things, the stuff we haven't moved out, and we keep just buying new furniture and trying to introduce new things into our life? We just keep stacking it on top of one another because we're not clearing any space out for our lives. And then we just end up being on hoarders. I use that in a very literal sense. And that's what we see with people on hoarders. And it's very easy to look at that and judge and say, oh, that's so crazy. But that's literally what they're doing. But you can do that in every area of your life, even with your time. And going back to Tanya and what she was talking about specifically with how do I make time for all these new things in my life, creating space is what we're talking about here with closing open cycles and law of compensation. You can create space in so many areas, physical space, you can do spiritual and emotional space, but also with time. That is also creating space. And so what we want to do here is close out any open cycles that are taking time. We want to also get rid of the good things in our life that are just good to make room for the great. So, but how do we know what to get rid of? Well, that's why we want to define our top 6 goals. She just did that. So my advice to Tanya would be every single thing that you are doing and every step that you're taking and every action that you're taking and every relationship that you have should be moving toward those top 6. And if they are not, those are the things that we have to reevaluate whether we keep in our lives or not, or whether we need to reprioritize. So maybe instead of seeing, that friend group that you've been seeing all the time, 4 times a week, maybe those are a friend group you just see every once in a while, every 6 months or so, and say, hey girls, I'm just gonna have to catch up with you when I can, because they're not people who are going to be moving into that top 6 space with you. And that is an okay thing to accept. But that's where the other principles come in, like for instance, be willing to let go of things that no longer serve you and embrace change. If you're saying, well, no matter what happens in my life, I have to have these same people and these same situations and same scenarios move with me, or I'm unwilling to move, well, you're not going to get very far, girl. Not going to get very far at all.
Yeah. And what's so much fun about this concept and practicing it in your life is you really understand and get to experience it's up to you. Like everything in your life is up to you. When it comes to looking at where you need to close cycles, you are looking at your energy and how you spend it and where you're currently plugging it in. And you're looking at the specifics of what comes back to you. And in the case of like relationships, it's not about judging. If you choose to slow down a relationship with someone or a group of people, or to amp one up, or maybe to forgive. It's not about the other people. It's not about saying they're bad people or not worth anything. No, not at all. It's not judgmental. It's just you deciding.
Not at all.
What you need to preserve within yourself. And I think about the experience of forgiveness in this situation. Forgiveness is totally wrapped around the law of compensation. The reason it's helpful to forgive is because at the end of the day, if somebody has offended you or done something wrong to you in some way, the action has been done, the words have been said, they're off living their life. You're left with the negative energy of that, the negative feelings. And forgiveness essentially illustrates compensation. It essentially illustrates the good that comes from letting go of the old. Because when you forgive and you release that negative energy, you now leave room for that positive space. So it's not about judging.
Yes.
It's not about saying someone is or something is good or bad. It's just saying this isn't for me right now, or I have to reorient myself around this way, or put this structure in place because this is how my top 6 is the utmost important to me, and I'm going to make sure my energy is circulating in every single way that serves those.
Well, and that's why it's really important to have clarity of where you're going, because it starts to really show you what your path is going to look like the more that you head in that direction. And if every choice that you make, we call them micro manifestations. When you have a big lifetime goal, right, that you're trying to achieve, the perception is that it's big, because we always say there's no big or small, near or far. That's all just, what we're willing and ready to receive in that
judgments.
moment. But when you have perceived this thing as to be a lifetime goal, what we end up doing is from where we are, there's always a gap between where we are right now and what we desire. That's why we don't have it. So it's about identifying what that gap looks like and then closing that gap. You can do it in the snap of a finger, or you create these smaller micro manifestations. And every single micro manifestation or goal that you achieve is going to be heading toward one of your top 6. And if it's not, it becomes so crystal clear the things that you're allowing in your life that are allowing or making you sidestep, really is what it is. You're allowing yourself to take steps to the side, and it becomes very clear what you need to let go of and release. But I love that you said, Charlie, and this is very important for everybody, this is not for me right now. It doesn't mean that someone else is growing at a different rate and going toward a different thing, and your paths might converge later, or they might converge in a different way, or your relationship develops into something different. Maybe somebody was a best friend and now they're not, but they can still be a cheerleader of yours, right? Because you're on different paths doing different things and different growths. And there are some people who are just not going to ever choose this as a lifestyle. They're not going to choose self-improvement. They're not going to choose expansion, right? And I've heard Oprah talk about this. Yes. And I've heard Oprah talk about this all the time. You have to be willing when you are desiring to grow and expand and become magnetic in your life. You have to be willing for somebody else's magnetism to start repelling you as a person. You have to be willing for that. That doesn't mean continue to weaken your magnetic power in order to keep those people close to you. You become as magnetic as you possibly can in life. And if their energy starts to repel, obviously that was not aligned at that particular time for them to be in your circle in that way. And we've talked about this in past episodes and we'll continue to, but a lot of time that contrast of somebody saying, well, this is not what I wanted with that person, actually leads to a lot of growth in other people around you. You can be the start of the change that you always have wanted to see in all the people around you just by being as powerful as you possibly can. So always do it with a spirit of love and a spirit of support, and cheerlead everybody around you. But it is absolutely okay to let things go, even if it's just for now. It's okay to move them into a different priority space, or just completely let it go. And the way I like to say it to clients, I say, especially people who are ready to cut people off, I will always say, don't close the door, but don't leave it open. Leave it cracked, right? You don't have to completely shut people out of your life. You can have an honest conversation with them, but it doesn't mean that you also leave the door completely open for everybody to come and go freely and step all over your time and your goals. It means that you leave the door cracked, and when it is in alignment for you to come back together, and you both have grown in a way that helps each other and supports each other's goals, and that feels good and doesn't feel like it has a lot of negative attachment to it, that's when you come back together in life. So this is something that has absolutely changed my world. My business relationships have changed. Friend groups have changed. Walking away from personal relationships, romantic relationships and things that was holding on to for a long time. But it has been so much for the good, not only for me, but for everyone else involved. It has always been better for the other person as well.
Well, and it radiates what you renew with when you close open cycles in your life, it radiates out. And like you said, for those that are released or let go from your life, they're now in a better space to go live their own journey, and maybe circles back. Or because your energy is now in a fully functioning circuit that goes out and returns back, and it cycles around, and it wonderfully impacts everyone who's still in that circuit, and not just people, but everything that you do. There's so much harmony. And I think for anybody who going, oh, this is interesting, but how do I know what open cycles I still have? Just look to where you're confused. Where does confusion exist in your life? And first, just embrace, I've chosen confusion, especially for things that you've been confused about for a long time, whatever they may be. I've chosen this confusion, and practice the law of compensation by saying, I'm now choosing clarity. On this subject, I choose clarity, and just commit to that belief, commit to that choice, and make it feel real that clarity exists in this. And that's your first step towards closing the cycle, and confusion won't have space to be there anymore.
That's amazing advice. And it's even better because we're just about out of our time for this week. But that goes right into what we're going to be talking about next week, which is the science of vibes. And as we start to get into energy, frequency, and vibration, those looking at the world through that lens, that's what Nikola Tesla talks about all the time. You will unlock the secrets of the universe when you start thinking in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So we start next week talking about vibration and the science behind that. But what we're going to start showing you how to do is to vibrate into a completely different space than you've ever been. This is the space where ideas exist, solutions exist. And so what you're talking about, Charlie, with this clarity, it's great to understand how to close open cycles. But when you're saying, well, what are my open cycles? And I don't know. That's why we are going to use some of these other tools to identify how to even get into the space to receive the clarity to close the open cycles. So that's what we're going to jump into next week, which is incredibly exciting. And we will yet again be circling back around to these topics over and over again, because there is an endless amount of exploration from many different perspectives. And that's why the coaching is so important especially for our coaching clients, when they're doing our system, talking about this over and over and over and over again, and revisiting these things, but with different questions, with different perspectives, different people applying this in their life in different ways, actually being able to talk one-on-one with people. You might have understood it from a certain level, and you say, yeah, I get that concept. And then all of a sudden, the fourth or fifth time you hear it is from somebody else's perspective in a way that it just snaps, like the light bulb goes on and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea
happens,
that
though,
is
when you
me.
Choose clarity.
That's me.
Right?
That's exactly what happens. Yes.
Yeah, when you live in the vibration of clarity, and definitely tune into next week's episode when we talk about where the idea space is and how that tunes vibrationally. When you live in the space of clarity, your answers will come from everywhere. You'll be hearing somebody else's question on a completely different topic, or watching another podcast episode. You're like, oh, you'll connect multiple dots. And it's just, that's how we move forward. It's wonderful.
Amen. This was a great episode. And like I said, we'll revisit this later. I'm going to challenge all of our listeners this week to think about this. Think about your brain as a computer. Think about the old program that you're running, and start thinking about, what does the new program actually look like to get you to where you want to go? You know, what does that feel like for you? We will talk more and more as the weeks go on about how to reprogram your mind, and what are some of the important like tools that you need to do that. But start to think about your brain like that, and think about the open tabs. Think about how many things are left unfinished in your life. And then think about the exact opposite. Let's use the law of polarity this week to think about the opposite of the way you feel now. Do you feel overwhelmed? What's the opposite of that, right? Is it peace? Is it calm? You know, what if everything were just okay in your life? That's a question we ask on our assessments in the system. What if things were just
throws everybody?
What if it was okay? Most people get frozen by that question. Yeah. They're like,
I love it.
I've never thought about it. What if everything just was okay? So we want to start just thinking about these, planting the seeds, and ruminating on this throughout this next week. And if you are interested, as always, we will always invite people to come into the coaching. We give you unlimited access to weekly coaching, which is unheard of. Most of the time, when you do any type of coaching, you got to keep paying people for coaching over and over again. We don't do that.
Yeah.
We give unlimited access. And let me say that a million times, unlimited access to coaching. You can come as long as you want, how often that you need to, in order to see these changes in your lives. And so
we've got a fantastic mentorship community. Yes. Participate. Yeah. Where you can put your questions, get answers, have accountability partners. It's fantastic.
And not everybody is ready for that. And that is okay too. If you're not ready to take the deep dive and jump all the way in, that's okay. That's why we have done this podcast. We've done this podcast in order to still put out this good into the world. We're practicing what we preach. We want to get these concepts out, and we're giving away tons of value absolutely for free to people, because it's not only the right thing to do as far as what our goals are, but it creates that cyclical energy flow, right? So we're putting out more into the world of what we want to see. We want to see more prosperity. We want to see more clarity. We want that world. So we're doing it. We're creating that by doing this podcast. But if you're somebody who is ready to say, this stuff is really hitting with me, and I want to activate this on hyperspeed and achieve my goals at lightning speed, jump into our community. So as I said before, you can go to manifestorsguide.com, and there's tons of information there. I'm not going to bore you with it here, but we're going to have a great week next week talking about the science of vibes. And make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone you think that it would benefit, because yet again, that is passing along value to other people, which in turn brings value back to you in your own life. So very much appreciate everybody for listening this week. Sending you guys tons of good energy. Charlie, do you have any closing thoughts?
Dewey, you wrapped it up perfectly. I appreciate everyone watching this week. Go start looking at where you're confused and start choosing clarity and closing those open cycles. And it's magical, I promise.
It is absolutely magical. Well, follow us on Instagram as well at Manifestor's Guide. And we will talk to you guys next week talking about the science of vibes. All right, we'll catch you guys then. Bye-bye.